It's worth reminding ourselves that Easter doesn't end with the empty tomb. The Easter story doesn't end with Jesus appearing physically, bodily to people. Because whenever you read the Easter story in all four of the Gospels, the telling of the Easter story doesn't end with the empty tomb or the appearances. There's something more. And so whenever you get to the end of Matthew's Gospel, Matthew 28, we have the risen Jesus saying to his disciples, "Go into all the world and make disciples of all nations." You go to Mark's Gospel and you go to chapter 16, to the end of Mark's Gospel, and you read this: "Go into all the world and preach the good news to all of creation." You get to the end of Luke's Gospel, and Luke isn't satisfied with one or two verses. He adds on an entire second book to describe how the disciples go into all the nations and make disciples and preach the good news to all creation. We call it the book of Acts. And then we come to the Gospel of John. And yes, in John you have Jesus commissioning his disciples to go out into the world. But John has something more. John, as part of this commissioning, tells us the story of Peter. Peter, who had denied Jesus 3 times. John tells us the story of the restoration of Peter and the recommissioning of him. And I want us to think about that this evening. And we pick up the story, if you've got your service booklets to hand, in John 21. And here's Peter and some of the other disciples. They've gone fishing. Peter's gone back to his former occupation. It's worth noting. And it's interesting because the scene in John 21 is very, very reminiscent of the first time, 3 years earlier, that Peter had met Jesus. Do you remember that story? Peter had been fishing all night. He had caught zip. But at the insistence of Jesus, he goes out again, this time in the blazing sunshine, and they cast their nets out, and what happens? They catch the most enormous catch of fish. And this has a profound impact on Peter, and he falls on his knees in the boat before Jesus. Do you remember what he says to him? He says, Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." And Jesus looks at Peter and makes no comment about the fact that Peter is a sinful man. Jesus knew that already. But instead begins to paint a picture for Peter of what his future is going to be like. And he says to Peter, "Today you will become what? Fisher of men." And so this adventure begins. Peter becomes one of the central disciples, probably the inner 3, Peter, James, and John, of the 12. Peter's there at the raising of Jairus' daughter. He's there at the Transfiguration. It's Peter who proclaims for the very first time, "Jesus, you are nothing less than the Messiah, the Son of the living God." So Peter's been center stage for the 3 years of Jesus' ministry. But then, at the very moment that Jesus needed Peter most, what does Peter do? He denies him. And not only does he deny him, but he denies him to a teenage girl who's a slave. So he's Peter, the burly fisherman, intimidated by a teenage girl, and he denies Jesus. And the teenage girl says to him, "Yeah, you were one of those guys. You were one of his disciples." And Peter, point blank, just denies the very fact. Nothing to do with him. "You must be mistaken." And it wasn't just once, nor twice. It was 3 times. And so Peter has gone back to his former occupation. He's fishing. And he's been fishing all night, and what has he caught? Absolutely nothing. So not only has he failed Jesus, but he's a pretty pathetic fisherman as well, to be honest. So Peter, things are not going well for Peter. And then there's a voice. There's a voice from the shore. Caught any fish? And you can probably imagine the disciples turning around to see who's asking such a stupid question. A question you never ask a fisherman. And then the voice says, "Why don't you try casting your net on the other side?" Advice that you never, ever, ever give to a fisherman. But they do. And what happens? The net is full of fish. And it's John who twigs who the person on the shore is. Who is it? It's Jesus. And Peter, who's short on brains and big on enthusiasm, jumps in and starts swimming to shore and just leaves the disciples to do all the hard work. And when he gets to shore, there is Jesus. And what does he find? He finds a fire that's been lit. He finds bread that's been baking and fish that's been frying. It's as if Jesus was expecting them. Can we just pause things there for a minute? Just press the pause button. I'm struck by a number of things so far in this story. I'm struck by the fact that Jesus knew where his disciples were. Jesus knew where they were. So this is Galilee now, Sea of Galilee, and Jesus knew where they were. I'm struck by the fact that Jesus knew what they were doing. I'm struck by the fact that he knew what their needs were and happily met them. I'm struck that Jesus wanted to help them. I'm struck by the practical way that Jesus meets their needs. It's not a sermon this time. It's a fire. Who doesn't love a fire? It's baked, freshly baked bread in the morning. Isn't that wonderful? I'm sure you get up in the morning and do that all the time. There's something beautiful about the smell of freshly baked bread. Now, I'm not so much sold on the frying fish, I have to say. Give me a bowl of muesli anytime. Fish in the morning just doesn't do it for me. But maybe for the disciples, that's exactly what they needed. But isn't it really practical? And I think as Jesus met the needs of his disciples, I think we can be pretty confident this evening to say that Jesus does exactly the same for his disciples 2,000 years later. So Jesus knows where I am. He doesn't need Google Maps. Jesus knows where I am, and he knows where I am even if I have wandered off. Jesus knows what I'm doing, even if I have gone back to the old ways. Jesus knows my needs, and he knows the best way to meet them. Jesus wants to help me, and Jesus wants to be with me. I think we can be pretty sure of those things tonight. It's at this point where the story goes from here, Jesus and all the disciples, and it narrows down to Jesus and Peter. 1-to-1, just the two of them together around the fire. And I'm guessing that for all of us, there will be moments in our journey with Jesus, in our walk with Jesus, that it will be just Jesus and me. Where there'll become a moment where it'll be important, where it's not just part of a congregation, but where it's just me and Jesus, no one else. Watch out for those moments. And when they come, make the most of them. So it's just Jesus and Peter. And Jesus is very tender, and he asks Peter 3 questions. Peter responds with 3 expressions of sorrow. And Jesus recommissions Peter 3 times. Just want to look at those just briefly before we finish. So the 3 questions are actually just one question asked slightly differently. And you see the question there in verse 15. Jesus looks at Peter. Interesting how he calls him by his own name, by his old name, Simon Peter, Simon, son of John. Do you see the question? Verse 15. Do you love me? Do you love me more than these? When was the last time somebody came up to you and asked you that question? I hope it wasn't a stranger, because it would have been really awkward if it had been a stranger. Do you love me? It's an awkward question, isn't it? Because actually, the answer to that question, do you love me, that answer could potentially define the rest of your life. Because if somebody comes up to you and says, do you love me? And I say, no, I don't. That's going to be significant in that relationship. If I say, yes, I do, that's going to be really, really significant in that relationship as well. Many, many years ago, I was in a counseling session with a professional counselor with a married couple. And the professional counselor turned to the husband, pointing to his wife and said, do you love her? And every single person in that room that evening knew that how he answered that question was going to define the future of their marriage. Do you love me is a profound and deeply significant question. And Jesus looks at Peter and says to Peter, Peter, do you love me more than these? I want to suggest to you tonight that for each and every one of us, myself included this evening, that Jesus asks us that question. That this question isn't just for Peter, that it's for me. And it's for you. Jesus will come to us at some point, and he will ask us, Clive. He may come to me and say, Clive, do you love me more than these? And he will come to you and he will say your name. And he will say, do you love me more than these? And can I say to you that your answer to that question will define the rest of your life. And please note that it's not, do you love me? What's the question? Do you love me more than these? And the question that Jesus is asking is your love for me greater than your love for anything else in your life? Clive, is your love for me greater than your career? Clive, is your love for me greater than your retirement? Clive, is your love for me greater than your wealth? Clive, is your love for me greater than all of your relationships? Clive, do you love me more than these? You see, in that question, you have what the Christian faith is all about. Do you get that? See, the Christian faith is a worldview, and it's a beautiful worldview. For me, the Christian faith makes sense of this world more than any other worldview. The Christian faith is a philosophy, and it is a world-defining philosophy. The Christian faith is a lifestyle. It's a set of behaviors. It's all of that. But before it's any of that, it is a love affair. So here's my first challenge to you this evening. Why don't you play this out this week? As you live out this week, Monday through the next Sunday, live out your faith as if it's a love affair. And just mull that over. reflect on that, think that through. What does it mean for me today to love Jesus more than anything else? Think of it as a love affair. This phrase defines for us what it means, what Christianity is all about. Because it says to me that my relationship with Jesus has to be the defining relationship above everything else. Above my relationship with my boss, my company, my wife, my kids, my desires. It has to be the defining relationship. If that scares you, don't let it scare you. Because I promise you that as you love Jesus more than anything else, then everything else falls into place, actually. And so there are three questions, and they're all the same question. Do you love me? And then, not only do we have three questions in this passage, but we actually have three confessions, three expressions of sorrow. So if you're looking at verse 15, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know I love you. And Jesus asks Peter that same question, and Peter responds with the same statement. Yes, Lord, you know I love you. I just wonder what's going on in Peter's heart and mind as Jesus asks him those three questions. Here's Peter, who has failed big time. And he knows it. And he hears these words of Jesus, Peter, do you love me? And probably deep down in Peter's heart, he's saying, yes, Jesus, I know I do honestly love you, but you know what I've done to you. And Peter's wrestling with his failure right now. And I think in that statement, verse 16, yes, you know that I love you. I think behind that, Peter's saying, I'm conscious of my failure. I'm conscious of what I've done to you, how I've failed you. But with all my heart, this is what I want more than anything else. Jesus, I want to love you. I don't know if you're here tonight and you're asking the question about what it means to be a Christian. And I need to be careful how I say this, but I want to say that being a Christian is not about being perfect. Because the Peter who says to Jesus here in John 21, you know I love you, we know from the Acts of the Apostles, he blows it again. So loving Jesus isn't about living the perfect life. Yes, we want to pursue holiness. That's our goal. But in this love relationship, in this love affair with Jesus, it's going to be about vulnerability. It's going to be about honesty. It's going to be about confession. That's why on a Sunday evening we always have a time of confession. Because that's part of walking with Jesus. It's this ongoing recognition. I've failed. I've done it. Yeah, I've sinned. I have sinned against God. I've sinned against my friends, my wife. There's things I've done. There's things I haven't done. And I want to be honest with you, Jesus, about this, recognizing that in my honesty, in my desire to be open with you, that with you there's grace, that with you there's forgiveness. I want to tell you a story. It's a small story, it's a brief story, but this happened to me this week. I want to tell you about somebody, and I can tell you about this person because you will not know who I'm talking about. I got a phone call from an old people's home, and it was quite a drive from Vevey. And so I drove to this old people's home to meet someone who had never met before, and they had never met me. But they were looking for an English-speaking pastor to come and visit them. And I walked into this room, and there was this person in a wheelchair, probably in their 90s, stooped over with age. And there were some pleasantries. Nice to meet you, I'm Clive. Understand that you're looking for an English-speaking pastor. I'm happy to meet you. How can I help you? And this elderly person began to pour out an event that took place in their lives 50 years previous. And I have to say, it was an issue of significance. And they shared that with me. And I find it very emotional because on two levels. One, that somebody would be willing to be so vulnerable and honest. And secondly, the thought that that person had carried that for 50 years. It's an incredible thought, isn't it? And then they said this to me. Do you think God can forgive me? That's why they had asked me to come. Could they be forgiven? And we talked about the death of Jesus on the cross and resurrection in the empty tomb and what Jesus was doing as he was dying on the cross. And this person was a chorister in a choir in their younger years. And we talked about Handel's Messiah, because I thought, I wonder whether you know Handel's Messiah. And I said to them, do you remember that piece in Handel's Messiah where you sing, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all? And we talked about how Jesus had taken all of our sin, the iniquity of our sin, onto himself. And this person in their 90s, stooped over with age, prayed a prayer of confession, asked for forgiveness, with the assurance that through the death and resurrection of Jesus, that there is forgiveness, even of the greatest sins. And as that person, their face lifted after that prayer, there was tears, but there was joy as well. And I think one of the reasons why John 21 is recorded for us, of the restoration of Peter is recorded, it's recorded for people who perhaps have carried something for years and have wondered, can I be forgiven? And Jesus' restoration of Peter is an answer to that, and the answer is yes. Yes. There is full and free forgiveness, not just for Peter, not just for my friend in the OMS, but for us all. Whatever it is, there is forgiveness. 3 questions. Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me? 3 statements of confession. And finally, 3 statements of commission. And I just love this because Jesus turns to Peter, who had blown it, failed him big time. And Jesus 3 times recommissions Peter and redefines his future. Peter thought the door was shut. Peter thought that it was over. Peter thought he was going to be fishing on the Sea of Galilee for the rest of his life. But Jesus says no to Peter, says, no, it's not over. It's not over, Peter. I'm recommissioning you. I have a future for you. And he would say that to each and every one of us tonight. I have a future for you. I was in Romania, came back Saturday week ago. I'll tell you all about it at some point. Absolutely fantastic trip. But we were there with a bunch of 30, 40 teenagers, and we took some adult men, an adult men's team, to Romania, and we were digging trenches and laying concrete floors and putting water into houses. It was just fantastic. But we had a speaker every evening, and the speaker was primarily for the teenagers, and sort of the old duffers like myself. We all sat at the back row and listened. But one of the things that the speaker did at the end of some of his sessions, that he sent these young people out, and he said, I want you to go and sit by yourself for 15 minutes, and I just want you to think about what we've been talking about. And do you know, if it wasn't snowing tonight, I might send you out for 15 minutes. But here's my question to you. What is Jesus commissioning you to? What's Jesus commissioning you to? Now, some of you here tonight have just said to yourself, he's not commissioning you. He's not commissioning me. You've just said that to yourself. You've just said to yourself, that question is irrelevant to me. Can I just say to you, that's a lie? Just cast it out of your mind right now. So let me ask you that question again. What is Jesus commissioning you to? In your retirement, what's Jesus commissioning you to? For the next week, for the next month, for the rest of 2019, what is Jesus commissioning you to? What is he calling you to? And I'm forcing this a little bit because I'm guessing that for many of us, we would not even dare dream that God might commission us to something. But I want to dare you to dream tonight that God may be standing before you tonight and commissioning you. Whatever age and stage you might find yourself in, young or old, Jesus stands before you tonight and commissions you. And could I encourage you to spend some time this week and just ask that question, Lord Jesus, so what are you commissioning me to right now? It's a dangerous question. It's an exciting question. I wonder what that might be for you. Because the God who stood before Peter that day, who called Peter to love him more than anything else, who spoke words of restoration to Peter, and who gave Peter a future, is the same God who stands before each and every one of us tonight and calls us to love him more than anything else. And who speaks words of healing and restoration and hope into the darkest recesses of our lives, and who gives us a future, gives you a future.